So, welcome back to another episode of Imagination Station Network, and today we have a very amazing guest who I am honoured to get to call a friend. Is Mike Ross, and I cracked a wee joke there before the camera came on. I was like, "Big Mike, meet wee Mike." Aye. So again, this pilot episode is about showing the creatives on their creative journey and sharing their journey along with us. But Mike has contributed to, as has his wife and his whole entire family, to the operation. But aye, there's a reason why Mike's on here. And I am going to try and no talk as much, but Mike is like me. When we get together, we're just out there. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Mike. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me on, James. I have to say, I feel a little bit of a fraud, but...
You heard it here first, by the way. You heard it here.
I don't actually know what I'm doing here. I've never been in this position before.
That's a good thing. And that's, like I says to you on a text message, I'd rather not read the bio of a guest until either a couple of minutes before or not at all, because it's a natural journey. So Mike is a humble guy. A lot of people in Berwick know him. And
I've got a lot to be humble about.
he's a guy who has had a creative journey and a half. Again, it's not my story, but for when I know Mike, he's been a builder, a joiner. He told me stories about the house I live in, and there's a bowie, a boat inside where the... But again, it's not my story. Guy's had a journey and a half, and we'll try and coax at least a wee bit of his creative journey. So, Mike, you're just, as I said earlier on, I said, trying not to offend you. I was like, me and Mike are very similar. He's just that wee bit further along his creative journey than me.
Well, a fair bit. I'm coming up my 71st birthday, so I'm a fair bit along the conveyor belt from you.
But I've got to say, your journey has been... I mean, you just have to sit with Mike for a wee while and you start to tell stories of things. And when I first met you, he gave me a book. So, and the books are there, so we may as well just... And this isn't rehearsed. These are just books that's part of Mike. And as I say, I didn't know Mike very well at that time, but he posted one of these through my letterbox, The Little Purse of Verse. Now, this has highs and lows. Before I read one of my ones out here that I've put the pen into, these are a very moving... I know you're like me, you play the funny guy quite a lot, but these are emotional. There's some of them in there that really hit home. Where did the idea for this come from? It's called The Little Purse of Verse. Where did the idea come from for it?
The idea, James, was strange. I discovered, I don't know quite what I was doing, probably clearing stuff out. And I suddenly realised that where some people would open a diary and write stuff in every day, and particularly if something had happened in that day that was fairly powerful or meaningful, in the life journey. And I suddenly found that I'd been writing poems.
Brilliant.
And they were all over the place. They were just jotted down in pads and hard drives and what have you. And I started looking, and oh my goodness, there was dozens and dozens and dozens. And at that time, I used to go around one or two local open mic nights. And my normal modus operandi was to sit at the back and see who was in and see what they were singing and see what they were doing. And I'd write a poem about that actual night. And you'll have noticed there's a couple of prints in there of pictures which were on the wall of Casmaranda Cafe, which used to be in the centre of Berwick. Right. And I wrote poems about the lasses in the paintings. So, because one night I thought, she's staring at me, like...
I didn't notice that, but now you gave it another way. You give it that 3D edge now that you know the place and you know the settings.
In Ford, there's a painting on the wall in the big hall in Ford Needle Estates, and they reckon that her eyes follow you around the room. And I was sitting there one night, and but anyway, slightly digressed. I do that a lot.
Go for it. Hey. Do it, man.
And I would just write a poem about who was in and what they were doing, and etc. etc. And somebody said, "Why don't you put them in a book?" And I sort of laughed. And I knew this lady, lovely lass. She actually turns out to be a publisher of poetry books, Squirtle Press. And I said to her one day, I sent her a whole load of rough, and she said, "Oh, yeah." She said I could do that. And of course, I didn't realise that publishers, small publishers, do maybe one book a month or every 6 weeks between or what have you. She said, "Oh, I could probably fit you in about 2.5 years." And I sort of said, I could be dead by then. So I went away with my tail between my legs, and again, somebody probably kicked me up the backside. And so I created Squirtle Press. Squirtle is a little place where my father used to work in Berwick on the walls. And I designed the logo and self-published it. It's a wee bit of a con job because, most folk put out a pamphlet and it's just them. But I thought that made it look a bit more professional.
Aye, I'm going to jump in there. I didn't know that. That's what I'm saying is like the creative journey you've been on is no far away for us because it is hard. I don't have a story that a woman would tell me 2.5 years, like my face would be a picture 2.5 years. But it's like, so you date yourself. So no, again, it's not about me, but we did the same. We created our own publishing company so we could just date ourselves. But there was something you said there that I think we need to pick up on was you sit at the back of the room. That is such a common thing for creatives that don't confess to being a creative. We'll sit at the back of the room and we'll suss the room out. But you've devised a way a lot, like you see me out painting cards in public. I feel awkward. So if you're sitting at the back of the room and you're creating the poems, what does that tell you? That tells us that creative. So the people out there that are like that, you're not alone, man. It's the fact is that there's another creative who has just openly said that, I sit in the back. I still sit. I face everybody for the same reasons. But to flip it, like, I've sold thousands of paintings, and I don't say that to show off. For the same thing, I can tell you what painting, where I was, how I was feeling, how I wasn't feeling, because that's what we put into it. So when you delivered this through my door, and I messaged you, and I said, I picked a few out, and I tell you what ones I liked, and I said, I wasn't in the best of place there. So creatives can feel stuff, whether you knew you were doing that or not, but the knowledge you gave me inspired one of my books that I wrote for the I'll no spoil, but it inspired a boat, if such, because of the story you told me about the house I stay in's got the bow of a boat. And anyway, that's my story. But this helped me through some times. But I'm going to read a wee poem out here, right? This one made me laugh. And this is the book it's like me. I see this book as like me. It's up and down, and then it's just hits you right in the feels. But this one, Mike wrote the date on it and the time, and he wrote this at 5:25 a.m. Now, you can probably tell what it was he was doing at 5:25 a.m. So, I'll read it in my broad Ayrshire accent, because that's the way I hear it in my mind. Loo paper, toilet tissue, what a great invention, worth king's ransom or a pension. As a youngin' newspaper was at the ready, nailed to the wall of my grandma's netty. Then along came Izzle paper, horrid shiny stuff. No matter how much you used, it was never enough. 1 billion times thank you, Bowwater Scott, for all your ever kindness to my tender bot. That cracked me up, man, but it's like, I don't know if you know when you do that, like when you read that and then you read the date and the time and then you're like, oh, it was on the toilet, it was on the back when it was right. But that's how the creative works. You can't, if you don't map it out, if you don't if you don't put a time and a date on it and come and show people, it's like, that's all right. If you keep it for yourself, that's fine. But if you're sharing it, you're a creative that shares everything, I'm trying to say, Mike. But
well, as you see, James, on the left-hand side of everything that was a poem, or that's meant to be a poem, is framed.
yeah,
And that was an idea that Prince Bottenberg, Kevin, came up with. The stuff that's not framed is kind of explaining where I was and how the poem came about.
I didn't even notice that, if I'm being honest. So this one needs no explanation. People will get it across the nation, because sure as every person's face they feed, here's correlation with their need. I brought my pen and all. I want you to sign it if that's all right, Mike.
Oh,
Hi, man. And I know you've signed it there, but I'd like a wee signature. There was a page. Aye.
oh, have I already?
You signed it and wrote me a wee note, but there was another wee bit that. And then you've dedicated it to his Jan. And if you don't know Jan runs and very well might add the Berwick Animal Rescue Kennels, which we're a big fan of. Sorry, it is a selfish part of the podcast when I'm like, I'm getting my people to sign my stuff. Aye. And you know, when you posted that and I got it through the door, I was like, this is epic, and it really does, man. There's stuff in there that really hit home, but I know there's other stuff you do.
I wondered what I'd
Don't
written.
read out my wee personal message. then it's their message.
Well, that kind of came and bit me in the backside on the official launch night, because I think there was about 80 or 90, and I'm stood there signing the books, and I'm trying to come up with a 2-line poem for every single person that I knew that was there, and that's pertinent to them. And
that's the gift, man. I can't express how much that I've met a lot of people in the last 5 years, and thankfully the majority have been good and kind. But can you imagine, as a new creative, a brand new creative watching this and going, oh, I like ditties, I like poems, and I like writing, and then they reach out. But if you're met with the horridness, and there is there, and I'm constantly telling people, you know, the horridness is part of the journey as well. But if you'd met with like 90 horrid people there, would you have kept doing what you did? That's the thing. But you wouldn't. So I will read it out, sounds Mike says. So James at Jag Art, thanks for all you do. A gift of words from me to you. And that meant a lot to me, because at that time it was just me. I didn't have all the amazing team. So thanks very much, man.
oh, thank you.
So we had a, like I say, it's not my podcast, but everybody's like, you need to stop talking as much. So I'm here to get all the information out. So Mike sent me a picture, and I did think he was going to bring it along with him. I was like, this is epic, he's bringing this along with him, guys. But he didn't bring it along, but he brought me his books. You handmade a rocking horse. Tell me about that, because I remember he stopped me in the street and he didn't have a picture of it then.
Well, Jan's father, my father-in-law, had become widowed, and he lived on his own. And bless him, he'd had his ears blown out in Cyprus during the Troubles, and so he's absolutely, totally deaf. And he'd been in the building and decorating trade and what have you all his life, since he left the Scots Guards. And we thought for one of his big birthdays, probably his 70th maybe, that he might like to get back on the tools a wee bit. And so we bought him a rocking horse kit, which is basically a whole load of lumps of plywood that you fix together, and then you like carve into the shape. And of course he'd passed, and we'd cleared his house, and I came across it 5 years ago when we all had more time on our hands than we'd like. Yeah. And I thought, do you know what? It's something I've never ever done before. So I set about it, and it didn't come out too bad.
Brilliant. He's modest, because he sent the picture. I was like, look at that. It's all sanded down and it looked lovely. So I guess, like, for me, like, I openly tell him I was 37 before I found I wanted to do that. But I've got to be honest with myself. Did I really just stumble across creativity? did I just stumble across something and did I have to give up stuff in order to become it? Now I'm about 5 years and I'm not entirely sure that's correct. So it's like, tell us about you as a youngster is what I'm trying to get here. Is like, what was it like? Were you creative then? Is it something that you earned along the journey?
As a youngster, I had one brother, 6 years older than me, and it was very much the heir and the spare. I don't know if you're aware, but after the Second World War, when they started building council houses and stuff, you basically were allocated a house on a points basis.
Right.
So my father had been in the RAF from 39 to 45. My mother was a wee bit younger. She'd been in the Women's Land Army from 40 to 45 and hated every minute of it, she told. And all she ever wanted was a boy, a girl, and a fluffy cat. And of course, the boy turned up. And then 6 years later, another boy turned up. And she wasn't happy at all. You know, if, well, we'll not even go down that direction. But, you know, a few years ago, a colleague of mine that I worked with, the hotel that we were down in Swindon was absolutely full chocker. They had one room, admittedly 2 beds, but only the one room. And so I had to share that night away on a business trip. And the next morning, I was putting my trousers on, and he says, "You put your belt on like a lassie." And I says, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, you slide it in." He says, "Your buckle's on the wrong side." And that took me right the way back. And there's something that I hadn't, you know how things lodge in your brain?
Yeah.
And then 30, 40 years maybe later, they sort of pop out. And we'd had the afters to my brother's funeral in the front garden of the house I live in now. And it was a sunny day. It was May, but we had a sunny day and it was reasonably warm. And it's not a big house, and there were a lot of people there, so they were out on the grass at the front, knocking back the whiskey and stuff like you do at a sort of Scottish funeral. And my mother actually said to me, "I'm glad you're a boy." And at the time, I mean, my mother and father, my brother had gone to grammar school. I went to secondary modern. I was a total failure. You know, I was always told I was no good at and out. The school I was at was kind of football orientated, and I kind of kick a football to save my life. So I didn't have an awful lot of self-confidence and, you know, what have you, etc. I was 16 when my brother crashed the car, and my mum and dad just, the whole lives just went down the toilet at 2 o'clock in the morning, knocked up by the police, and I had to go around and organise at 16 pallbearers and, you know, organise a funeral. And it's just 54 years ago today, actually, and never leaves you. But it was decades on that. I mean, thank goodness I never had any money, because I think if that had come to my head sooner, there'd be a psychologist in Hollywood or something would have made a fortune out of me sorting that one sentence with my mother. And basically, you know, she never thought she was going to lose the heir, but suddenly she valued the spare. And all her life she'd wanted a lassie, because she was a massive knitter, my mother. And I think she wanted to knit cardigans, and she was a sewer. She used to make herself dresses to wear out at night, because we never had any money to buy any. And I think she would have wanted to make little wee dresses for me and, you know, that sort of thing. And when I got down to analysing that, that one sentence said at my brother's funeral, it kind of put an awful lot of things about my life in place, if you know what I mean. There was an awful lot of misaligned blocks that suddenly lined up with mortar in between.
It's like, it's when you're ready to listen. It's like when you're ready for them to have the effect on it. It's like, I totally get that, resonates. Is like, by the way, my name was meant to be Heather Jane, so we are so similar. And my mum knitted. Heather James, when I sing it, Heather Jane was meant to be my name.
She never told me what I was going to be. I never knew that.
But I guess, you know, the foundations are there, is like what you're saying, you know, the foundations of and I guess as well, we're a creative mother. Like I say, very similar to me, you watch maybe knitting and doing stuff, but subconsciously, nobody knows how the creative journey transpires, like in all shapes and forms, from mechanics to welders to this and that. You try the stuff.
Do you know, I've never ever thought of my mother as creative. That's the first time in my life. You saying that with the knitting and sewing up our own dresses. I'd never ever thought of that as creativity.
And as a young kid, like I'm always like, I talk about my granny, Sweary Mary. That's why I'm into tea, but I'll tell you that later. Like when you're that size and you watch, and then later you become a creative yourself, and you're like, where did that come from? And that's what I was saying at the beginning there, is like, it's already been there, you've just not realised it until you're a guy that you do everything, and you would do anything for anybody, and that is one of the things that stands out for you. There's a lot of people in the town we live in, but you, somebody is a creative. If you can create something for somebody and get away, there's something else on the table that you've got as well. But that for me, again, try not to be such a selfish podcast, you do a lot, man. It's like, and you don't ask for anything in return. And as a creative who sees that, like the story with your mother and my mother, there is like, if I hadn't seen that, I probably wouldn't be doing the things that I do, because I'm all about paying it forward. If you've got something and you manage to do it, yes, okay. Some people say you need to make money. I get that, but there's other ways of being wealthy, and like your poems and your words. Like I say, you didn't know when you post that through the letterbox. I tell people I'm lonely, so I've sat and read a wee verse book, which I picked 10 out and sent to them, and goes, you know, that really hit the spot. So it's like, they things that we don't realise, because we just think that everybody can write and everybody can paint and everybody can do that. That's why the podcast exists, is because not everybody can, but if you're willing to try it and you meet people like yourself along the way, the right thing is to come on here and hold you up and show the world that, in my mind there, I was thinking of the Lion King, and I was a wee monkey and I'm holding you up. That's my creative mind. But I mean, the rhyming off just a few things there that you've done, that you've got to have trialed a few things. Is there stuff there that in the creative journey that's never worked?
Oh, well, depends what you. As I say, as a child, I was always told, and I don't know whether part of it is down to having been in the RAF, having been in the Land Army, having been in that situation where for 6 years of your life you're basically told how high to jump and when you can come down, you know, whether that somehow killed any creativity that might have been in my father or mother to better themselves. But, you know, where others were buying the houses, they were, oh no, well, that's a bit risky, you know, they kept paying the council rent. And so, you know, I just don't know where I was well on. I mean, I was failing at everything as I saw it. You know, first wife went away and left me, you know, and my wee nipper, he was about 2.5 when she went. So Thank God for Jan.
Well, you've got a steadfast woman beside you, and you know, you're like a team like we've never seen. Like, and take it for people who we hold you in high regard. Like I say, I'm not here to blow smoke up your backside, but when we see the stuff you do, if we had an extra, if there was an extra it was the 8th day of the day, we agree as a team we would come and we would at least spend time with you to try and help you, because you mentioned a word there that really resonates with us and the podcast as well. Risk. I'm all about, you have to take an element of risk in order to discover the creativeness that we're trying to show you. There has to be an element of risk to go, well, try that. Whether it be your own way of risk, whatever it is. I can only put it in my words because that's all I've got. Like, to risk showing the world something. You know, a scare factor.
Well, this is scary because, as you know from half an hour ago, I fill up very easy. And to hear you telling me the effect that some of these poems had on you, it's very, very powerful. I mean, it's
on me, man.
somewhere in that book, I don't know whether it's in the prologue, the epilogue or something, I've written that the point of art is the transfer of emotion from the artist to the recipient.
Yeah.
And, you know, years ago we lost a friend of my daughter's. She'd known my daughters, one through being at school and being that age, and the other one through riding. She was my daughter was a wee bit younger than her, but they rode at the same riding school and they knew each other. So the lassie was always in our house. You know, we knew her fine. She went through cancer right the way through her teenage years. And I wrote a poem, which is in there, which I came up off the dunes with scattered her ashes off the back of a pony. So a year or so went by, and I get a phone call from a mutual friend. You've got to come down to the stables. I need you to come down to the stables now. Oh, okay. You know, I'm up the eyeballs, you know. Oh, no, you've got to come down now. You've got to come down now. So cut a long story short, Sarah's mum and dad had decided that they were going to have a bench made and set in the dunes overlooking where they used to ride the horses on the sand. And they'd used a couple lines. And they want me to see it before anybody else did. It just literally been... Sorry. It just literally been stuck down into the dunes, fixed. They wanted me to see it before anybody else did. And I had no idea that they were doing it. I had no idea that they'd had the thought process. And I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than losing a child. And to use words from my poem as like the almost, you know, the epitaph, you know, it was just...
What an experience though, like, and I always jump in, but I always pick up on that, like, what a way to be immortalised yourself than to join somebody in their journey, that you're there for the beginning and also you're there for the end, and now you've been immortalised in words. So what was once somebody hiding in the back of the crowd and then going home and writing words, that was meant to be. I always hear me say the journey is always, whether even the left or the right way, it's the way, and now you get to show the world and your family with their words. Whether you knew that at the time is irrelevant. It's like when it comes to now and somebody sees that your creativeness has set them free. That's the thing for me, is like, that is one of the most powerful things. And I don't mean immortalised in a God sense. I mean immortalised in the sense of mean, you get emotional because you're a humble guy and you know how much that means to people. You know how much that would have meant to her and to her parents. That's something else, man. That's something else that I can only a tiny bit resonate with it because I've yet to experience something that powerful. But what a gift. Your gift meets a gift.
Yeah, and the trouble is it's a two-edged sword. When I asked Kevin, I told Kevin, the graphic designer, exactly what I wanted and why, the shape, the size, the whole thing, the purse. And one of the ideas was that the second book was going to have ANO just scribbled and an R in a kind of a scribbled font. So the front of the next book was going to be another little Perseverance, but absolutely identical.
Oh, right at the top.
At the top, it was going to be in red, just as if it was graffiti.
Brilliant.
Now, part of me, on a bad day, I think it's because I'm lazy and useless and an absolute waste of space.
Well, see
But
that.
10 year on,
I need to stop you there. Like, see that whole useless and the waste of space. That's what we hear for schools. That's what we hear for places of establishment. Please don't give yourself that much of a hard time on that. I'm that guy. I'm telling you for a place of comfort and discomfort that I know how that feels. It takes as long as it needs to. So that's why it takes so long, because we give ourselves that hard a time. I'm lazy, I'm this, I'm that. No, you're not. You're a creative that's resting the creative mind, hands, body, soul, whatever way you want to look at it. That's the whole part of the creative, man. It's like...
But you see, the if I put my rational head on, and I mean another a lady who'd bought the book, she said, and it's on I think I used it on the back there. No, I didn't. But she said her teenage son, who never read anything, put that in the toilet, and he used to say, "I'm going to the library."
Brilliant.
And she said it was great because he never read anything until he got his hands on that.
See, this is the same avenue as the podcast. This does what we want the podcast to do. Do you understand that? This is doing what we want our message to be. That's why you're here at this right moment in time, sharing strength, hope, all the other stuff. Because I see this, when somebody's come to visit me, I used to carry this in my pocket, and I just randomly and I'd pick one out. Do you know that one verse was the exact verse that person needed to hear at that time? That's how powerful words that you've created in a book are. That's why you're sitting in the seat and we want you to show the world, because we believe that the journeys that everybody comes along and they join are meant to be. Everything you've ever done is meant to be. You've got other stuff there as well, like the masks?
Well, I've always been, one of my earliest ever recollections was being dragged off to the doctors because I used to drive my parents nuts. I just didn't sleep. I used to keep them awake at night. And
Sleeping masks.
yeah. The first thing I ever tried to make with my mother's sewing machine was a sleeping mask. It was absolute crap. It did nothing at all, but I was probably 7, maybe 8. They used to drag me down to the GP, who used to give me a sedative, as they called it in those days. Nowadays I would call it a chemical kosh. But so anyway, donkey's years went by, and I eventually started working shifts and et cetera, and I, sleep's one of the most powerful things in the world. If you don't get sleep, you don't get quality sleep, you're absolutely knackered. And I discovered that light was a massive issue. it's interesting actually that a lot of work has gone on as electronics has gone on over the years, and the ability to watch exactly what brains are doing while people are doing various things and sleeping and moving about, etc., etc. They now know exactly 3% of the wires that come away from your eye don't go to the optic nerve. Right. They go to something called the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is what controls your hormones, and they operate your circadian rhythms through the night. You know, when you go through and your brain goes through a circadian rhythm, and everything that's happened in the day that's in your like RAM either gets chucked or put into the hard drive. If it's and then it goes to your heart, and it kind of gives that a chance to rest, and then it goes and sorts your liver out, and then it sorts your kidneys out.
I've never known the words for it, because I've always said that, you know, it's like when I go to my bed, I pass out, I don't fall asleep, because my mind is just still going.
Well,
but it's like, aye.
But sorry, slightly digressed. What I wanted to say in slightly going back to why the second book 10 years on still hasn't happened, and I have tried to start it several times, is I was saying that this one came out of random jottings all over the place. And when I actually started, because they were written for me, they were personal.
But they wrote for you, but the words translate into somebody else's.
So then starting to just randomly produce poetry for folk to read. Just do you know what I mean? I've never been able to...
Somebody buying one of my paintings that I painted for me in a commission. That's why I don't do a lot of commissions, for that exact reason. There's another great factor. Like, I get it that people they'll just go in and do it, but see when you're painting stuff because it makes you feel great. Yeah. For your mental health, for everything.
I mean, I actually started about a year or so ago, and January the 1st, and I've got the notepad, and it's in one poem a day. Is that the way to start the second book? You know, and that's it. I can't remember the rest of it, but that's it. That's as far. But do you know what I mean?
Oh no, I really know what you mean, because that's.
They were personal. They were all personal, and they were never meant for anybody else to read.
But the reason why I'm saying I agree is that it's no different. Like, so mine's is like, it's words and then it's a painting, or it's a painting then it's words. So I've got a two-factor of it, but there's times where it'll be like the day I'll maybe not get a chance to paint, but I'll be thinking about it. You know what I mean? I'll be thinking about it. Yeah. It's like I'll be moving it to the next stage or whatever it is, man. But when it's right, man, even if a second book never comes, the fact is you're willing when it's ready for it to come. People don't get that, mate. People don't have that. There's as I always talk about the ones that are out there behind the couch. There's somebody out there that's feeling the same way you feel right now. So it's right that you come on here, and it's right that you share all this stuff, because we can come in here and we can talk about all the airy-fairy, or I love life and I love this, and it's like, not once have you said that. We need to hear the fact is that creatives are like everybody else, except they think a wee bit longer. We think we were heart, we think we were mind, and it's like, that's what I hear is...
Well, I walked out of school a few days after my 15th birthday. I never even got a leaving certificate, let alone exams. I just hated the place. I absolutely detested it. I just felt that nothing I could do. And do you know what? And I'll say this direct to camera rather than you, James. If you're a teacher, or you're a teacher in training, and let me tell you this as a father of 5 kids who you would never believe all had the same father. 5 more different kids you could not have. I've got a gifted laddie who expects and usually achieves 100% in every single exam he ever sits. I've got 2 dyslexic laddies and I've got 2 lassies who are as different as chalk and cheese. But the 5 of them all had problems at school because you guys are trained to turn out sausages. Hunnas and hunnas and hunnas of identical pink, 2.5 inches long, 3/4 of an inch diameter sausages. And kids are no like that. My laddie's individual skills and my lassie's individual skills are worth an absolute fortune. Whether they'll ever make it, what they deserve, I've no idea. But do not put kids down because you don't understand them. If you don't understand them, that's your problem, not theirs. Sorry, rant over.
Oh man, it's a valid rant. It's like, as a neurodivergent one of the kids, and again, like yourself, school wasn't for me, never was. And that's one of the things where I learned most of my stuff outside it. Good mind, but we'll know that's a different podcast.
As soon as I started, I walked straight into work at the Shipyard, just a few weeks after I left school, and that was where I really started to learn about people and humanity and life and the graft in the shipyard and the reality. And do you know the wonderful thing about shipyards in those days, because nowadays everything's just spat out by computers, and the computer tells the laser cutter to cut the pieces out, and it's a completely different world. But in those days, you could have every single level of IQ imaginable, all participating. And when those boats sailed down the pier out of Berwick, out the Tweed, to go and catch fish, be a luxurious yacht, put fires out, tug ships, there was a little bit of you in that steel.
You can tell, but like as a creative lad, I'll never get to experience that, because in my mind there is like everybody's out in the dock. This boat has been grafted for whatever, a year or whatever, and then in the next minute it's in the water. And that, you've just explained something that I was going to ask her later, but you've just explained that the creative process of the journey, when you have nothing and then you have something. If I could tell you, like, and I don't know if you did it, like when you created this, like I'm like some of your sons, I'm dyslexic as well, so it's like when I wrote a book and people were coming up to me in the street and saying there's spelling mistakes, you know how that felt, man. I was like back at school. But to have a finished book and for people to read it, doesn't matter if 10 people or 10,000 people read it. I've cried myself to sleep. And no all happy tears. It's like, I'm doing this and living it. So to be there in the dock where everybody's putting a boat out after they've all grafted their own individual, like you say, I liked what you said there, with no higher peers, everybody there just boating. And that's a great metaphor, actually. I'm going to steal that. We don't steal, we borrow now. It's like, I'm going to keep that. Like what we do is, like, and what you do is, that's your boat. That's your boat. And when you're getting creative, you let who you want on your boat to come on and be creative. And I think that's a hard thing, is like people are constantly trying to change you into what they see. Like the sausage one, I like that as well. But everybody's trying to change you. So as a creative who's relatively new at it and taking for the experience that you've just given, we're the captains of our creative ship. We let who and what on our ship, and we can get too overcomplicated by letting the wrong people on it. But they're no entirely wrong people, places. They're on there, and they might cast the wee anchor once, or they might sail your ship, but they'll join your journey, or good or bad. I hope somebody gets something out of that. But that's like, explaining what a creative journey is like is hard. But you've just literally explained it.
I think you said in the intro about highs and lows in the book, but I mean, talk about highs and lows in life. I mean, probably the biggest low, and I actually went into a depression, definitely. There's no question that I went into depression. How long it lasted, I honestly don't know. But I mean, we're talking months, not days or weeks. And it reinforced the whole, you're useless, you'll never be, why you wasting your time trying to do that, because you'll never succeed. I got blethering to a guy one day that I thought was a van driver. We're just blethering on. And I says, oh, I'm struggling at the moment. I says, I'm trying to write a book. And he says, oh, what about? I says, well, about the police, you know, and carrying a gun in London and, you know, the various different, I says, oh. And we had a wee bit blethering. He pulled a card out of his pocket and said, would you mind sending it, what you've got? And I read it. And in those days, I mean, we're going back 30 odd years. In those days, the BBC was a very creative place. They made their own, you know, the studios in White City. They had massive big studios. They had their own cameramen, their own soundmen, you know, their own teams, their own producers, directors. I mean, nowadays they just buy stuff, the same as ITV and Channel 4 and everything. You know, somebody makes it and then hawks it round. In those days, they had their own people. And this guy handed me his card. John B. Hobbs, one of the loveliest guys I ever met. He'd been BAFTA nominated for a thing he did with Wendy Craig many, many years ago called Butterflies.
Right.
And he was producer-director at the BBC in comedy. And he said, would you send it up? So, of course, we're talking pre-computer and what have you. We're talking typewritten out to the no even very great photocopying and what have you. Anyway, I sent him up. And I came home from work one day, ages later, and Jan said, oh, we've had a phone call for the BBC saying, could you go up and have lunch at the White City, you see? So, wow, goes up on the tube, goes in, and it's really hard because we had it in the canteen, and you're trying to sort of act cool, you know what I mean? You're totally at your depth. It's the first time you've been there, and you're sitting, and there's all these faces that are on your telly screens every night sitting at the tables around you, and you're trying to project, oh no, I'm you know, I'm not going to ask you for an autograph now because I'm part of what you are, you know. Of course I wasn't. Anyway, John said to me, he said, well, as you know, he said, I'm comedy. And he said, this is kind of dramatic. He said, I've got friends in the drama department. He says, you know, if you wanted to go and do that road, he said, I could ask one of them to have a read. Because when I'd had the initial blether before he pulled the thing out, he said, well, why are you writing a book? And I said, what else do you write, you know? And he said, TV scripts. And I laughed in his face. I said, what would I know about TV scripts? And that was when he handed me the card. And he said, I'm reading a lot of black humour in the drama. He said, do you think you could write a script camping up the humour, you know, bringing the humour at the front? And I said, well, the idea, I said, I suppose all I could do is try. I said, but I wouldn't know the first thing. He said, look, he said, and he said to one of his, make a parcel out of them, put a bit of string so you can carry them. So he gave me a whole bunch of scripts that he'd been sent, unsolicited scripts, because writing for television is a very, very formalised. He said, and a set is priced at whatever it was, £100,000. So if you build in too many sets, they'll say, "Oh, it'll be too expensive to make." You know, you can't have too much filming out in the street because that's expensive. That's a lot more expensive than shooting in the studio. So you've got to follow the formats, and you can't have too big a cast, you know, because they've all got to be paid, and you know, blah blah blah. So anyway, I went away and I had a shot. And cut a long story short, we had 2 or 3 more lunches while he sort of coaxed me on. And one day we were up having lunch, and he said, "Right, that's it." He said, "That's the pilot, done." He said, "I can do no more for you now." He says, in those days, I think they did 11 or 12 episode series. And he said, "Right," he said, "Off you go." He said, "That's the pilot, go and write 6 episodes. Wow. And he said, "Let me know when you've written 6 episodes." And I thought, wow. Oof. So off I went. It wasn't rapid. And presented them up, another lunch. There you are. And a wee bit of time went by, and I was invited up to the White City for a Friday night, and I didn't know whether I was going up for commiserations or celebrations. And I found out later that on the Tuesday of that week, Alan Yento, who at that time was head of BBC Two, had signed off on my series, which would have meant that I would have been given a cheque for the 7 I'd written, and half the money up front for the next half dozen to complete the series. And would have gone into looking to think, well, who would we like as actors for those different parts, and start whispering in agents' ears and sending them bits of scripts and saying, "Do you think they'd like to do this? You know, are they likely to be free?" And as I say, this is completely all going on at a far higher level than me. And because John said to me, he said, right at the early, in the initial blether, he said, "Well, I've always wanted to do a police series." He said, "I did one once," he said, "but it didn't get a second season." And I said, "Do you mind telling me what it was?" And he said, "Oh, it was called Rosie." And I said, "Oh, I said, as I say, this was the initial blether just after I'd found out who he was. I said, "Shall I tell you why it didn't get a second season?" And he said, "Go on then." And I said, "It wasn't a police series, was it?" He said, "Go on." I said, "Well, that was a series about a young guy and his girlfriend, and the young guy's relationship with the girlfriend's parents." I said, "The fact that he actually earned a living as a copper in a seaside town was just on the periphery of the storylines." So I said, "You were up against Wolfie Smith, Power to the People, you know, him."
I'm too young for that.
Him, his girlfriend, and his relationship with the disapproving parents of the girl. I said, "You were up against, what was it called? He was a scrap metal merchant, drove a Rolls Royce, what have you. His relationship with his girlfriend and her parents, because they thought he was brash, and etc." I said, "You were basically up against 3 identical scenarios. They just had different jobs." He said, "You're absolutely right." I said, "What you want is Hill Street Blues in London." And he said, "That's exactly what I want." So anyway, on the Tuesday, Alan Yento signed it off. And on the Wednesday, it was big news, absolute massive financial cock-up at the BBC. Both comedy and light entertainment have both been given the same £60 million to spend at the start of the year, and they'd both spent it, which meant that there was a £60 million hole in the finances going forward. The accounts had gone in to sign off the year. And all new projects were boshed completely. That was that. Now, if I'd had my head on, if my parents had brought me up differently, if a big word, I would have said to John, right, John, unfortunate, I'll go away and I'll write the other 6 episodes. We'll do some stuff with the agents, we'll pick some. So next year, when the bidding process comes in, you can go to Alan Yento, you can say, there's the 12 scripts. These are the actors who are signed up to play it. This is what it's going to look like, and this is what a success it's going to be. But having been brought up all my life to believe I was a total failure, I basically went home, shredded the scripts, went into a complete and utter mental breakdown. Wow. And just how Jan put up with me at the time, I have no idea.
Thing is, though, is like that would have led on to stuff, and like I've always got a story because we're so similar. I done the same. I done a Lowry and went home, and nobody believes in me, so I know how that feels. I slashed and stabbed and shoved in the wheelie bin about 100 to 200 paintings. I know what that feels like because they weren't all bad paintings. In my mind, I wasn't good enough. That's some story. It's I had a similar thing with the BBC. I'm going to tell you off air, but I had a very similar. I know how that feels, and it's very, very hard. And in between, this is where no such thing as coincidences, and I'm not making this up. So I'm going to tell you off air. When you posted that book, I was going through something with the BBC that never happened. So I know. So look what happened, and it connects it, and you can verify with one of the team and they'll tell you exactly. And that connects up the circle.
I'd never call you a liar, unreal, James. You've never lied me.
It's unreal how and what I'm trying to say is like the creative journeys as well are so close together. But see if we just share, like the podcast, it's like if we just come together and share. So I need to tell you the disclaimer. So it's like imagination is all you need to bring to the table. A station is somewhere where you go, but also is somewhere where you can stand still and watch. And that's what this is, a network. You've joined the network because you've gave us your time on here and you have came on. We don't have an awful lot of time left, but I want you to tell me more about these because I started it and you're like me, I go off on something else. Do you sell these?
I do.
And what do you do with the money? Do you keep it for yourself?
To be perfectly honest, I don't make an awful lot of money because I sew every one myself, and there's a lot of time goes into them. They're all hand sewn, and the actual finishing on the inside. Some of them go off. Some of them are being sold for charities.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I wasn't being cheeky if MD's listening to this on the Spotify. Because Mike's wife, she runs, as I said, the Bark, and I know that I've seen these before. That's why I asked, and I was like, because he gives a lot to charity. So let's get the last few wee bits in. Where can we buy these? The little purse first.
You can't.
Can't. So there you go. You can't have one, and you're not getting mine.
To be honest, I had a reprint done about a year or so ago, which I had to do because I totally run out.
Yeah.
And there was a spelling mistake in there. And it had been doing my head for about 8 years. When I saw it, I just could not believe it. Like but it was one letter in a name.
Yeah.
And it's the one about Jim Clark. and it said Eading Tom instead of Eadington Mains, and it was an M instead of an N. And of course, with all the spell checks and all the computers and everything else, it never picked up because it was a name rather than a proper. So I had that corrected when I had the reprint done. I had the M turned into an N.
I do know what
And
that's like.
so you've got an original, you've got the spelling mistake.
So I tell people like this, like that story I just gave with the woman who stopped me in the street, and by the way, we're still pals. I said the second time I introduced, I said, you know, the Harry Potter book with the spelling mistakes in it went for $1 million. So we can either give your money back or I turned it into an opportunity. So there's something we've not touched on. I know we've got an hour there. So Mike, we're going to get you back on. That's without a doubt. Without a doubt. This is a 2-parter, probably a 3-parter. You've got so much information you don't even know you have. See, for a man that's able to come on, as a human that's able to come on and show what it is to be like in your own world as a creative, to cry, to laugh, to that, that's immense, man. We need to show the world that it's a journey, it's your journey, but we can share it. But you're also on another journey, and I'll let you, you're on your YouTube channel, so let's get a wee plug. Tell us a bit about your YouTube channel.
Well, I had my 70th birthday last year. I will be 71 in a few days' time. And I started, it's quite funny because there's so many of these, life begins at 40 and 50's the new 30 and all of this absolute rubbish that's been knocked out by advertising agencies over the years, I guess, to plug whatever. And they've just become part of the usual vernacular. People just say these things, not really meaning it. And then you're 69 and you start looking for a bit of good news about 70. And you find there is only one bit. It's in the Bible. It's in Psalms, and it basically says you get 70 years and 10, and then bye-bye. Superfluous, unnecessary, off you go. So I started trying to lose some weight and trying to work out what would kill me if I didn't start doing something, because I'd always been pretty lazy, and as I say, I'm useless at sport. And I came up, we went through a lot of names, but I came up with surviving at 70. The at being the anthosan at, all one word. And I thought, I might like to start doing a YouTube channel saying not about necessarily being 70, but what I wished folk had told me when I was 50 to prepare if I actually managed to get to 70.
So it's not dissimilar to what we're doing. That's unreal how uncanny that the journey is. Just you meet somebody and then all of it. And that's what we're finding is like, as soon as you meet somebody and you find like these journeys are, once you open it up, once you get the tin opener out and you start opening it up, it's different.
So I've been as frustrated as out, sorry to jump in, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, because we've got about 4 episodes, the first 4 episodes in the editing stage, and I've been wanting to get it out, and it's just suddenly clicked with me.
Is it live? Is it, so can people find it?
No, not yet. Not until it's edited and put up.
What's the dates? Because the guys will...
It occurred to me yesterday, funnily enough, that the 11th of June, which is actually my birthday, would be the ideal date to launch it, because then I will have survived 70 and I'm starting 71. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to lean on the young mate of mine that's doing the editing for me and the filming and aim for the launch on the 11th.
So
and
this will
want
probably be just a wee bit before
Well, that would be fantastic.
So where can they find? What's the name of the YouTube channel? That's
Well,
what I was going to ask.
It will be Surviving at 70. All one word, and the anthasan at in the middle. Please plug it, like it, subscribe.
We'll get it. We'll tag it.
And
we'll try and put a wee tag in. It'll probably most likely not be when we put this out, but I'll go back in and edit it.
yeah.
Mike, thank you very much for myself and for the team.
Well, thank you very much.
Such an interesting guy, and the reason why we have this up here behind you is our motto is inspire to be inspired. And ever since I've met you, you're an inspiring guy. I get it, you're a lot like every other creative, and I don't mind saying that we're alike at this. We don't give ourselves enough credit. We go down, because I used to say I'm lazy, I'm this and that, and I've stopped it. I've started to brain train myself and go, it takes as long as it needs in the journey, and we do a lot. But I also want to say thank you to all our other guests. Alas, this is the 5th, and we're leaving on a high with Mike. This is the 5th and final part of the pilot. But, like I always say, stay tuned. There will be lots more going on. I am not going to say anything. I'm prone to telling all my secrets out, but I'm not going to say it. Thank you all the guests that have come. Anybody listening on Spotify, thank you very much for listening as well. And the YouTube guys, please stay tuned, and there is a lot coming. Again, it's been amazing. Mate, you're an inspirational guy. We're going to get a second part out, you have no doubt. Listen, whatever you do, please don't give yourself a hard time on the creative side. We can be our worst enemy sometimes. But for myself and the team, thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you again. Bye-bye now.